Good evening. Welcome to this evening's Trinity-Pawling webinar. This is a different format for the junior college day, and I gotta be careful calling it that because a couple of years ago, somebody didn't join us because they thought we were going to just talk about junior colleges. So it's really the college day for our juniors to get ready to be seniors next year. Mr. Harff and I, it's funny, we talk about this day with mixed emotions. It's both sad and happy. It's very sad because it's the day we say goodbye to the senior class, and we've gotten to know these guys pretty well. In fact, I think I could probably tell you the blood types of most of the kids in the senior class. But it's a joyous day too, because we now get to meet the juniors. And parents, you probably are aware your sons have just gone through the Junior Global Collaborative Challenge. And that was great. Both Mr. Harff and I have got to work with them pretty much one-on-one for the last 2.5 weeks, and got a chance to look under the hood and see how they think and work. I wanted you to be aware when we talk about the college office at Trinity-Pawling that it's more than just Mr. Harff and myself. Denise Palmer also works in the college office. She is our registrar, and what that's a fancy title for. She's the person who takes care of our transcripts. And the transcripts, which you'll find out later this evening, are a huge piece of the college admissions process. And it's a very detail-oriented job. And Denise has been doing this for quite a few years and is absolutely fantastic at it. And it's really helpful having somebody with such good institutional knowledge in that position. We also have something called the Dunham Committee, which we're going to talk about in more detail later, but that's a group of 16 faculty members who help compose what's called the secondary school report. And that is a letter that goes out with every applicant, and that letter is a holistic letter of what your son is like at the school, but outside the classroom. What is he like on dorm, on the athletic fields, in the dining hall? Just what type of person is he? And these secondary school reports are written by different members of the Dunham Committee. And as I said, there's 16 members to that. That is also complemented by numerous teachers who will be writing the teacher recommendations that will go out for your son as well. The teacher recommendations, we ask that each student collect 2. One will be from a history or English teacher, and one will be from a math or science teacher. You're going to learn a little bit later, not every college requires 2 teacher recs. Some require 1, some don't take any, but most schools as a general rule like to see 2, and 1 from the humanities and 1 from the science and math side. For some of you, and this is where this gets a little uncomfortable, this is going to be the first time you're going to basically lose control of having the ability to step in and fix a problem for your son. There are real deadlines that carry real consequences. It's imperative that your son takes it the next step and basically becomes a young adult. This process is about him. It's not about me. It's not about Mr. Harff, and it's not about you, the parent. It's about your son. That being said, he's going to have to take responsibility for the process. Now, you and the college team, we will work diligently to support your son any way we can. We're on the same team. We're also going to tell you things that you might not want to hear. We also may recommend schools that you've never heard of before, but we know it would be a very good match based on your son's academic performance and the school. We're asking you to trust us, to work with us, but be aware your son has to have buy-in. It will not work as a parent-driven project or a Slade, Mead, or Scott Harff-driven project. It's got to come from your son. There's going to be some very frustrating moments. I'm just going to put this out on the table right now. You all are going to have confrontations at some point in this process. I have a very nice daughter. We decided to still keep her after the college process. But there were a couple moments when I was ready to trade her away. So for instance, if you go through the experience I had where I drove her to Clinton, New York to see Hamilton College, and she wouldn't get out of the car because there were too many trees, you got to roll with it. You can't try to be rational at that point. You have to just shake your head and say, yeah, there are a lot of trees. This is probably a very bad school because there's a lot of trees and probably woodpeckers and termites. We really should get out of here. You got to go with it. There's no way you can explain it to your spouse why you didn't get out of the car other than it just wasn't going to happen. But we still love our daughter nonetheless, even though I cannot see her ever returning to Clinton, New York. I will tell you, this is going to be one of the most rewarding experiences you ever have. We have seniors right now. In fact, I was just talking to one of our panelists. One of our seniors just got into early decision to his school. And I know from talking to the family that this is going to be one of the greatest Christmases they've ever had. There's excitement. It's a time for a new chapter, and it's a big chapter. So I'm excited that all of you are going to experience this very rewarding end process. The process for your sons is going to start January 1st or after the new year, where Mr. Harff and I are going to do one-on-one meetings. If we have to do it by Zoom, that's fine. If we can do it in person, that's fine. That first initial meeting, we will come up with a list of colleges. It is not set in stone. It is a list that's made with a pencil and an eraser. But we want to get the input from the student first, and then we will share the list with you parents. But please let your son go first and tell us what he's thinking he wants out of college, because sometimes they'll tell us things that they may not have told you. Now, here's part of the whole puzzle that's so fun and interesting. This process does include a third party. There's the son and you, us, and the colleges, the representatives from the colleges. And tonight, we've put together, I would say, probably the best panel we've ever had. This panel represents a small liberal arts school. We have Alan Painter, who is the director of admissions at Hobart and William Smith College up in Geneva, New York. I've known Alan for 13, 14 years. He was at Dickinson for a long, long time, and then he moved over to run the shop at Hobart. Very excited to have Alan here tonight. We also have probably one of Trinity-Pawling's best friends in the admissions world, and that's Chris Doyle. And I say that for a couple of reasons. Chris is at Marist College, which is a mid-sized school. So Alan's at a smaller school, Chris is at a mid-sized school. The reason Chris is so great for Trinity-Pawling is he's one of those wonderful people that if you reach out and ask a question, he gets back to you right away. He may not always tell you good news, but he will tell you straight news, and he will often try to work out a solution. And that's part of this process that's so great. People like Alan Painter, Chris Doyle, and Yvonne Wang, who is with Penn State University, is joining us. And again, she's a point person for us at Penn State, and she represents the New York territory. Penn State obviously is now much bigger than the other two schools, and it's a state school. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to do a panel discussion with a small school, Hobart and William Smith, a mid-sized school with Marist, large state university, Penn State University. And Scott Harff, my co-director here, is going to be the MC. We've received quite a few questions. I'm going to sit on the panel, but more in the background unless something comes up that I think is missing. So with that, Scott Harff, over to you. Thank you and welcome everybody to this year's College Day for Junior Parents and Juniors.
Thank you, Mr. Mead. Before we start the panel, if anyone in the audience has questions that they have not been able to submit yet during the registration process, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. And if you send that, if you submit a question through there, I will get it into the queue and make sure that our panelists are able to address it. Alan, would you mind doing us the honor and introducing yourself, please?
Sure. So good evening, friends. Thanks so much, Slade and Scott, for having me. us, Chris and Yvonne, glad to be here with you all. Again, my name is Alan Painter, Director of Admissions here at Hobart and William Smith in Geneva, New York. Really excited to be here. Yesterday marks month number 3 for me here, but certainly for the last 20 years, I've been in small liberal arts colleges, obviously 2 back in PA, but most of it at Dickinson. So loving this opportunity, loving that I continue this great relationship with TP. So yes, looking forward to continuing here.
Thank you, Alan. Chris?
Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Slade. Welcome, everyone, and I'm happy to be here. Hope you're all looking forward to the holidays. I have worked in college admissions for 14 years, primarily at Marist College, also a short stint at Johns Hopkins University down in Baltimore, Maryland. And I hope this evening is helpful. I hope it does not ratchet up the stress and anxiety. Hopefully, what we say tonight will help you better understand the human side of this process. And certainly don't be shy. Ask as many questions as possible. I'm pretty sure Alan and Yvonne and I will be happy to answer as many as we can tonight.
Thank you, Chris. And Yvonne?
Yeah, hello, good evening, everyone. So my name is Yvonne. I'm from Penn State, beautiful Happy Valley here. Great school spirit out here. So I work in undergraduate admissions here at University Park, but I can also speak on behalf of all of our 20 campuses. So I think one thing that's really unique about us is the fact that we have 20 campuses all over Pennsylvania. So you guys feel free to ask any questions. I hope to get as many of those, concerns, questions, or just anything that you want to have answered. So tonight, thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. We'll start with you, Alan. Just in general, can you begin by outlining the elements that your office is gonna look for in applications?
Yeah, so we and I think you'll hear this a lot among a lot of small private schools as well as others. We take a holistic view of the application, and I know that sometimes that can sound like, okay, what does that really mean, holistic view? But trust me when I tell you, whether we're seeing 3,000 or 4,000 or 6,000 or 8,000 applications, we really do try to take that intimate time with your application. For me, obviously now I'm seeing it from the director end, and I always tell students, I'm trying to be your BFF. You're my BFF, and I want to look all through your application, get to know you. That still holds true. I want my team to get to know their applicant. In terms of, so when we think about, the pieces of the application, obviously the application itself, where your activities are listed, your brothers and sisters, where they go to school, where your parents have gone to school, all those things are all going to be in there. Your major interests, but so let's just go down that little checklist. Your activities. These are the things that you've been doing for the last however many years. All of these things are important to us, and obviously they were important to you. That's why you put them in there. So if you're in Boy Scouts, I love when I see a Boy Scout who has gotten their Eagle Scout award. That means you stayed consistent all the way through. That is just amazing to me, because again, I'm the one reading the application. So if I like it, leave it in there. Your sports. I'm I hate to say this, former athlete, because I really think I still am an athlete. But I'm an athlete, so I love when you have your sports involvements in there. But if you're captain of the basketball team, and you know what, you happen to win the state championship, and it's because of you, okay, you can brag a little bit. It's okay, it's your application. But if you're a captain, we certainly want to see that leadership. I'm a father of 3 kids who are in college now, so they're all athletes, and it was important to them. So don't feel like you have to hold those things back. Your service, working, babysitting, all those things. Students, put those things in there. We are a test optional school. We've always been, well, I don't say always been test optional, but for quite a long time. But if you do submit them here, and you're not quite sure, you have what's called HWS choice. And basically, we will decide whether or not it's going to help you or hurt you. If we think it's going to hurt you, we simply won't use it. But obviously, if we think it can help, because for some students, quite frankly, the SATs can help their application, we will leave those things in there. So you do have options there, but just know that we're not going to use it as the sole indicator of why we admitted you. Obviously, your transcripts are going to be very important. And we want to see that you've challenged yourselves, obviously, you performed well, but again, we are taking a whole view of your application. Did you have a down year, 1 year in calculus, but somehow bounce back in the next year in a different class? We will see all of those things, but we want to know that you've challenged yourself there. Your recommendations, these are teachers, these are coaches who work at the school, your counselor. Those things are all important in the application. These folks are our colleagues also on the other side of the desk, so they know you. Obviously, I'm now getting to work with Scott, but have known Slade for years, so I can always rely on that phone call or text message. Slade is good at that, and say, hey, I want to talk about, John. John seemed real amazing, but I want to find out a little bit more. And phone call right there. What else am I missing? Interview is another piece in the application. Not a requirement, but I encourage it. And then of course there are those things like visits and all of those other options. Again, pieces that we put all together to just build this package. And of course, it's going to be seen at the very least twice. And then of course, it's going to be seen once again. That's one thing that I do talk to our staff here. I want you to check over that application one last time before it goes out. One, because I want to make sure we want to send the accept letter to the right student. But two, we want their right address. And certainly, are you sure that this is what you meant? So take a nice thorough look one last time before this goes out or doesn't go out.
Thank you, Alan. One of the things that I think before I move on to the next question that both Chris and Alan have already, we're 17 minutes in here, and I think is already coming across, and I hope that parents and students that are listening, you guys are picking up on this too. It took me about a month into this job to find out how much of a team this is. And Mr. Mead already brought it up, but there's us, there's the student, and then there's the college representatives. And I think the first conference I went to, one of the first things I learned was the people on the other side of the desk. So Chris, Yvonne, and Alan are here as counselors too. And they're here to help your sons and help you get through this process. And often they're just as big of advocates for your son as both Mr. Mead and I are. And I think just by showing up tonight at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday, that shows. And then, as we build these relationships, that's one thing that I've learned a lot from Mr. Mead on, is continuing to utilize those relationships, but also continuing to rely on those relationships as, again, another counselor for your son. Moving on, Alan talked a little bit about transcripts. I want to move over to Yvonne, just because Penn State uses the self-reported academic report rather than a traditional transcript. So could you just explain what that is, and then how Penn State's going to look at grades as opposed to a smaller
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I could start off by saying the best way to apply to Penn State is early action, which is non-binding. You have until May 1st to let us know whether or not you're coming. So it really doesn't hurt you. There's only a little over 8,000 spaces at the University Park main campus for first year students. So we got over like 85,000 apps, and honestly, on our early action deadline this year, we had over 10,000 apps that came in on one day. So with that volume, really the best way to apply is applying early and getting that early action deadline. And so another greatest mistakes on our Penn State application that I've seen is they do their Common App and they submit their recommendation, they have their transcript submitted, and they think they are completely done and finished. Well, that does not complete your application to Penn State. You actually need your self-reported academic record to be done through the My Penn State portal. So it's our own unique portal that you need to do on our own website. And how that works is you're literally just reporting your grades, whether it's an AP class, whether it's an honors course, IB course, college prep course. You're just really reporting your courses and your grades as if you're just looking at a copy of your transcript. And we pretty much calculate our own GPA accordingly to the different like math, social sciences, arts and humanity. And so, and how that works into play is what is your actual intended major, okay? And so sometimes students might think I have a GPA of 3.9, but when we actually do our own calculation based on the academic college that you are applying to, that is going to be different, okay? So at the University Park campus, we have 12 academic colleges, and if everybody is applying to the Smeal College of Business, the Smeal will become very, very competitive, okay? I always like to give the example of like pre-medicine. So if you're doing pre-med, you're going to be doing a lot of biology classes, chemistry classes, right? And some calculus courses. So obviously on our self-reported academic record, we want to see that, we want to see a good grade or an AP class and senior year scheduled courses. We want to see you're continually challenging yourself in taking those coursework. So really the self-reported academic record is really the way how we calculate and do our evaluation. So how important is it? It's extremely, extremely important. So, and I think all the students here being at Trinity-Pawling, you are very fortunate because you will be getting that extra attention from our territory managers that manages we are not able to take care of everybody. We wish we could. We wish we had the manpower to, but there's only X number of schools that we're able to really pay more of that holistic attention to in reviewing our applicants. So yeah, I hope that explains what purpose that serves.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to move over to Chris. So Alan talked a little bit already about test optional, but could you, Marist, you guys have been test optional for a while now, correct?
Yeah, we've been test optional for more than a decade.
And so can you just expand on how we've heard about how Hobart William Smith treats test optional? Could you talk about how Marist does?
Yeah, and I think, given the year that we're in, I think there are two test optionals, right? There are the institutions who have been test optional for quite a while, and there are now the institutions who were kind of forced to go test optional because students didn't take the exams. And so a lot of schools this year were trying to figure it out. Schools like Marist and others who had gone test optional quite a while ago had looked, for us over a decade ago, we had looked at our students who were applying and those who were being accepted and those who were not. And what we're seeing is that quite a few students who had very strong and rigorous transcripts were not being accepted to the college because they didn't perform well on a Saturday morning. And it didn't sit well with a number of us in the office. And so we started to collect some data on it and look at students who were admitted, who had lower scores. And what we were finding is that they were performing at the same level, if not better, than their peers who were in the same majors and at the college. And so ultimately that led us to adopt a test optional policy. Our faculty approved it and we moved forward with that. And every year we track students who are accepted to the college who have not submitted standardized test scores. So we look at them at the completion of freshman year and we draw a comparison between them and their peers who were accepted with test scores. And every year for the past 12 years, we have found there is no correlation between student success at the college and standardized test scores. And so for us, every year we have until this year, which most schools are seeing, we typically have about 25 to 30% of our 12,000 applicants apply without test scores. And when we look at who we are accepting to the college, less than 1% difference stands between those with test scores and those without. And so I always like to mention that to demonstrate that we have truly de-emphasized the standardized tests in the admission review process. And so students who go test optional are still eligible for merit scholarships, the honors program, the first year abroad opportunities. There's nothing they're ineligible for based on that decision. And what we will do is then focus more on the high school transcript in the academic review. And that's just something that, if your test scores are not there, they're just not there. And we just move forward. If they are there, they are part of consideration, right? And so they're in that conversation about how successful and how prepared is this student to come to Marist and pursue XYZ program. And so that's really been the approach for 12 years, and it has served us very well. And it has opened up the doors of the institution to students who don't do well. They might have test anxiety, or maybe they couldn't afford to pay for all the prep or whatnot, but there's a whole host of reasons, and it has served students well, and it's served us well. And I think this year, given the pandemic, a lot of schools were forced to go test optional. I think it's something like 1,700 schools or something like that in the country at this point, who were never test optional before, right? Caltech, who, right, you would never think would go test optional, is now test blind. Not even test optional, they're test blind, right? And they want nothing to do with standardized test scores. And so I think what we'll see as a ripple effect of this year is that of those 1,700 schools, many, many more at an accelerated pace will continue to have that posture. They'll continue to be test optional.
We just had a really good question come in kind of as a follow-up. So I'll send it right back to you, Chris. But so you're talking about students who are doing really well in class maybe, and then don't do quite as well on a test. What about a student who's average to above average and then knocks a test out of the park? How are you gonna read that student?
Yeah, so I think Alan touched on this briefly earlier in his remarks. And, there are those students who, like I said, if they submit test scores, it's part of the conversation. It's part of the evaluation. So there are students who maybe, for whatever reason, they had too many clubs and organizations, or they're in a really rigorous school, and they go and they sit for an exam and their exam scores are well above average, right? That at any college or university bodes well for the student. Right, there's no downside to that. I think there are the students, however, who are not, say, average, but who are performing at a below average level, and then they go and they take a test and they knock it out of the park. And I think sometimes colleges can draw the conclusion that maybe this student was either really, really bored in school, really distracted, or just really lazy. Right? They start to kind of fill in the blanks. But I think for a student who is kind of middle of the road, average student doing well in their classes, if they have a phenomenal test score, it's only going to help them.
Absolutely. Alan, I'm going to jump back to you. So you started to talk briefly about campus visits and tours. Kind of two-part question. Number one, what do you guys have available now, given our current status of the pandemic in terms of virtual options? And then part two is, how are you evaluating that in terms of demonstrated interest in your applicants?
Sorry, had to unmute there. So first things first, we actually have been open. So have been welcoming tours since I think late July, obviously, so before I got here, and have managed very well. And quite frankly, we're extremely proud of the student body, our faculty, for just managing so well. I think my first couple of weeks here, I think the highest number of cases was like 10, but they were already in quarantine when I got here. And then there was like 5, and then for 5 or 6 straight weeks, we had 0 cases. So we certainly managed our tours well. Some days we had, we spread those things out. So that's first. But We didn't move like many places went to a virtual world as well. We did have 2 virtual open houses, one in late October, one in November. Virtual information sessions. We've been holding those every Tuesday, Thursday evening, as well as a Saturday morning, late Saturday morning to accommodate West Coast as well. I sat with a young man from Kazakhstan this past weekend. So that was neat. I don't even know what time it was there, but we had students who come in all the time, and then of course the virtual interviews. I think the neat thing about the virtual interviews, especially so for me, definitely very strong in college access programming as well. And I know a lot of folks talk about equal playing field. I try to remind them, especially for the international students, we've been doing Skype interviews. A lot of us have been doing Skype interviews for well over a decade. This is something that's always been there. It's always been available to us, especially with even boarding schools too. Students being able to do the phone interviews and the Skype interviews. I think this has, in a roundabout way, leveled the playing field where you can now have these Zoom interviews, even if you can't make it to a college visit. We're not going to frown on you either way. Actually, it's been kind of good, because sometimes if you might, Slade will tell you, I'm a big dude, not that good looking, so I might be intimidating in person, but over Zoom, we're the same height. I'm not that scary at all. So it's been great to sit and talk with folks over Zoom. Sometimes we just get carried away talking. I had to talk with a young man who's sailing. We had a talk. I'm like, look at this lake here. This is awesome. So it's been great to just sit over Zoom. But this is your opportunity to share you. I'd say take advantage of any opportunity that you can to connect with the institution that you are applying to. If this is it, this is it. We want to make note of it. I think this has given us more opportunities. I probably offer 3 or 4 slots a day, except for Sunday, so that students can meet with me. So if it's out there, take advantage of it. It's out there for a reason. If you can do the virtual tour, do it. So we have all those things available on the website, and obviously we'll be adding more moving into the spring.
Alan, can you follow up on the demonstrated interest and explain what that is?
Oh, yes, sorry. So demonstrated interest. So obviously demonstrated interest obviously turns, it shows its way via visit, it shows its way via interview, email, all of those things are demonstrated interest. Basically for us, and I'll speak for us, we want to know that if we're going to extend an offer of admission, we certainly want to know that we can enroll a student. So like I just had one last night, I talked to the counselor and said, quite frankly, if you offer, I can't promise you that she's going to be interested. I think you're just one more application. Wow. I mean, that was a shot to the chest, but all right, good. I was like, well, we're just another application, because I really wanted to interview the student. But do take advantage of it. If it is a place that you have an interest in, if you've got my email address, if you've got Chris's email, Yvonne's email, reach out and show your interest. Let the school tell you that it's too much. I told my kids the whole way through, this is your process. This is the last time you will apply to undergraduate college. I would much rather a college tell you that you are putting too much out there than not enough. So demonstrate your interest and let us use all those things. Now know this, if you send, and if we're sending messages to you, let's be honest. I know if you've opened it. Unfortunately, it's not information that I want. And quite frankly, depending on the level of what you have, blame Google, blame Snapchat. We could probably tell you where you were sitting when you opened it. And it's probably, and again, it's not information that I want, but it happens to be there. So, and I say it because there are sometimes students who will say, I didn't get an email from you. I didn't know that. I'm like, you just opened it 10 minutes ago. I just saw that. Now I'm not going to throw that out there, but Slade and Scott and I might have a conversation. I'm like, hey, Slade, this kid's blowing smoke up my tail. He's saying he's not reading my email. He's absolutely reading my email, or someone is. And so one thing I told my kids, and again, I wouldn't give advice that I didn't even give to my own sons and daughter. If you get an email, at least acknowledge it, even if it's a thank you. If you have an interest in such and such school, at least acknowledge it. Don't let an email go unanswered. If there's a problem with you doing all that because you are so busy, pass it to me or mom. I'm not going to respond. I'm going to make sure you do it, but I will remind you to do it. But definitely take care of those things because it can be a lot, but it's well worth it if you demonstrate, if you do your part. And it certainly shows. So demonstrating interest for us is good. We definitely want to make sure we are going after students that we at least have a shot at enrolling.
I'm glad you mentioned email. We had a student 2 years ago who was on what's called the wait list, meaning he didn't get in, but he didn't get denied. The college waited past the process time in May and put them on what's called a wait list, and they'll go to their wait list to take people if they need more students. And this student called me and said, I really want to go to that school now. And this was over the summer. And I called the school. I told the student he should call the school, but I called the school. He had not opened 13 emails. And it's very hard for me to make the argument that you really are dying to get in off the wait list when the Chris Doyle or the Yvonne or the Allen says, yeah, but we've written him 13 times and he didn't open his emails. Yeah. So, and whether you like emails or not, this was really for the kids. The parents are good with emails. Emails are the way we communicate in this business, and you got to get over it. You got to read emails, and if they're coming from Mr. Harff or me, you got to read them. If they're coming from one of the colleges to which you've applied, you absolutely have to read them.
Can I just add to that? Just very briefly, Scott and Slade. So this, I think, goes back to what you were talking about in the beginning about the student taking ownership of this process. So as a parent, it's, I think, very hard not to be in control of this. And so the tendency is you're monitoring the emails and you're reading them. So that student who told Alan that he didn't read the email could have very well not have read the email because mom or dad read the email for them. And then the students put in this awkward position of Alan knowing that the email was opened and read, but the student maybe never having read that email. So that's just a quick point. The other side, I want to just go back to retention real quick, or demonstrate interest real quick, and the correlation with retention. So some colleges and universities will actually look at demonstrated interest as a way to measure whether or not the students they enroll will retain. And the reason why that makes sense is that if a student is selecting to attend a college or university that they have researched really well and they understand really well, when they get there, they're more comfortable because they understand the experience they're going to have, versus a student picking a school just because it sounds good that they got in and then going and maybe not retaining because it's not the right fit for whatever number of reasons. So there is a retention side to demonstrate interest for the colleges. It is not totally admission driven, if that makes sense.
And I will just add to that, just coming from a large university point of view, 46,000 undergraduate students here at the University Park campus. Do we look at demonstrated interest? In some ways, definitely yes. So if we have that one last spot available, we are going to select that student that have attended our virtual events, that have opened our emails because we can see that, and that have outreached out to us with questions and shown that, hey, this is a school of my top choice. Ultimately, we hope after we extended the offer that you would accept your offer of admission. So, but another thing I wanted to say is that Penn State, we are doing one-on-one counselor appointments. It's 15 minutes. So as large of a university where you will have that opportunity to have that one-on-one session with any one of our admissions counselors. You don't know who you're going to get, but there's a ton of us around. So it's just, we all have different shifts. And if you are going to, because we are in this virtual world, if you do sign up for a virtual event and you didn't show, we actually know, because right when we pull up your profile, it's going to say no show, and it just doesn't make the student look very good. If we do just have that less, the last couple of spots, we are definitely going to extend those spots over to the students that have shown up at our events and answered the emails. So just kind of ditto on everybody, what everyone else just had said, how important it is to keep that in mind.
And I think following up on that, one of the big advantages that all of you, the students, are going to have next fall are the college visits. Hopefully they're on campus. This year we didn't obviously have any on campus. They were all virtual. But every year we have close to 150 college reps come through. And not only is it an opportunity for the students to learn more about Penn State or Hobart or Marist, but it's also a great opportunity for someone like Yvonne, who's reading hundreds and hundreds of applicants, to be able to put a face to a name. And I think one thing I've been really proud of, and I know I think I can speak for Slade here, is that every year our students do an incredible job of making really, really good first impressions in those. So that's something that, again, hopefully we're going to move back to in person, but I've noticed through the virtual world has been something that certainly, if we can't get back to in person, has not been lost in the process at all. Yvonne, I do want to go back quickly. You did mention, so we were talking about this self-reported academic record and AP classes. How are colleges going to look at a student taking an AP course versus a student taking an honors course or a regular level course?
Yeah, so we look at the school's profile as well, because each school has its profile that's usually attached. So we definitely review those and take those into consideration when we are reviewing that. But yeah, definitely remember how I said the self-reported academic record and how we calculate our own GPA and accordingly to the different segments, that's when it really comes into play. So AP there's more weight to it, right? So, and if you guys just Google Penn State AP credits, you'll see the list of AP courses and what it would be equivalent to. So it's really simple that students could really have that information just by simply Googling.
Alan, do you mind jumping in? Same question, but more towards the small college side of things. How you're weighting APs?
You're on mute, Alan.
Well, I thought I said something really nice there too.
That was amazing. I read those lips, but do it again. I love this guy.
For us, as I shared earlier, we love to see that a student has, taken, challenging courses that are offered. So if I see there are, 60 APs offered, but your limit might be such and such, we want to know that you've done your due diligence in challenging yourself. Now, with that said, I don't want to see a student taking AP classes, just for the sake of, having them, and then you've turned in a bunch of D's and F's, but I took an AP class. Well, yeah, but, it just wasn't there for you. But, so take the classes because you think you can succeed in those classes in some way. And certainly we will look at that, but, it's something that we love to see. We love to see the IBs, we love to see the honors, but most importantly, we want to see the students successful. And of course, within the context of, talking with your counselor, we'll get an idea of whether or not you challenge yourself enough, or maybe you just weren't cut out for those classes. So again, it's that holistic view of taking everything in the context. Absolutely.
Chris, I'm going to jump over to you and we're going to shift gears. So this is going to hit more of the parent side of things, but can you just briefly talk about the financial aid process at a school like Marist?
Yeah, so for Marist and many schools like Marist, there is both need-based financial aid and there is also merit aid. And so the merit aid is awarded to students based on the merit of their applications, which is largely academically based. There are typically at schools like Marist tiers of scholarship levels. So for us, the top scholarship is a full tuition and ride scholarship. And then you have from that to $25,000 per year, all the way down to $10,000 per year. So that's determined at the time the applicant's review happens and the scholarship committee sends out their decision letter. The need-based financial aid side for us is FAFSA only. So many schools do require the CSS profile. We do require it for our international students. But for US students, permanent residents, they are only required to complete the FAFSA. And so what that does is then it's reviewed by the Department of Education and generates what's called an estimated family contribution, whether you like it or not. That is the number that the government believes you can afford to contribute toward your child's education. And so 99% of families disagree. But that is the number that goes to the colleges, and that is the number that the colleges will then use to generate your need-based financial aid package. And it's also what's used by the federal government and the states to determine aid that's awarded from the states. Now, what I often tell families is that you have to keep in mind the federal government and state methodologies are different from the colleges. So if you determine based on an older child who's gone through the process, or you've done a FAFSA forecaster, or you've been told by a friend that you won't be eligible, then that's okay for you to draw that conclusion and not file the FAFSA. But what you have to realize is you are then indicating to the colleges that you are not interested in being considered for need-based financial aid. And so at Marist and schools like us, when a family checks no to that question, and they also have not submitted a FAFSA to us, the college assumes that you are not interested in being considered for any grants from the college. And so we have more discretion, obviously, because it's our financial aid dollars that we're awarding to students. So if the federal government or state denies you or says you're not eligible, that doesn't necessarily mean that Marist would say the same. And so I tell that to families every year over and over again, and every year over and over again, families, come back later and say, thanks for recommending that. We actually did receive a grant from the college in addition to our son or daughter's merit scholarship. So it does take some time. They have made the process a lot easier by linking with the IRS tool. So you don't have to gather up all your tax documents. It's easily accessible now. And, I always tell families as well that keep in mind the FAFSA doesn't ask all of the questions. So it doesn't take into consideration a number of different things. And so when you receive that financial award package from the college, if there are other things that you think should be considered, like, I don't know, a global pandemic that destroyed your bottom line of your business that you run, something like that, that's a great thing to let a college know because it is based on the prior year's taxes. So this year's this year's revenue may be drastically different from the prior year, which they're using to generate that estimated family contribution. So I'll stop there because I know that's a lot. I don't want to confuse anyone.
One item that the FAFSA does not ask for, which is relevant to a lot of Trinity-Pawling parents, is if you have another child who's in school at a private boarding school or prep school, the FAFSA, the federal government doesn't really care. It doesn't go into their calculation. But obviously, if you're paying tuition at a prep school for another child, it will impact, and you should let a school like Marist know. Chris, you hinted at the CSS profile, which I like to call the FAFSA on steroids. And some colleges require that. Hobart, you guys require it. CSS, Alan?
We do. However, if you are Pell eligible, we will waive that.
Okay. But what the CSS profile does is it digs deeper. And as I like to say to parents, is if you have legitimate financial needs, it's your best friend. If you're hiding money, it's your worst enemy.
Thank you, Mr. Mead. I would like to, we're going to shift again back to Yvonne. Can you talk briefly about the honors college experience at a big state school like Penn State?
Yes, I would love to. So I think one thing to always remember about the honors college, and it's probably one of those things that is least talked about within all of our prospect sessions, is that honors college has over $300,000 a year to give away for students in the honors college for either study abroad, internships, scholarship, like extra scholarship money, for them to do global citizenship or undergraduate research. So there's that money, like $300,000 each year, that is within the academic college. So that is an endowed college that have a dean, within Penn State. So that money is for the students, and only for about 1,200 students. So each year, we only admit about 300. We usually admit a little over 700, but the actual enrollment rate, because the students don't yield, is about a little over 300. So thinking about this is an endowed college, just over 1,200 students. Now, you're really elevating that academic experience at Penn State to an entirely different level, okay? Other than the fact that you have your $5,000 in academic scholarships a year, that is already guaranteed, right? And then you have honors housing. So there's like guaranteed all 4 years honors housing at the University Park campus. And it's the two best Simmons and Atherton's, literally like smack center of everything you want to be. So you have priority registration among over 46,000 undergraduate students. You're always going to get the best schedule, everything you want. I think the best thing that comes out from that is that opportunity, so I think it really just carries that opportunity onto an entirely different level. Whether it's career placement, right? Whether it's that internship, whether it's that personalized faculty attention, right? So 25% of the courses the students will take in the honors college is going to be honors courses. They're all going to be 24 students or less, taught by a 10-year faculty, okay? So they're the best faculty of the best, right? And a lot of the classes are going to be more of an embedded element. So sometimes it's a faculty-led research project that, the first couple of weeks you're going to be in a classroom, and then because Schreier has the funds to really support these students, now they can now take the students abroad, or it's whether to a research site, domestically, they can really now make that class come alive, right? So these are just some examples of how Schreier students really have that different opportunity versus just a regular Penn State student. So I highly, highly advise all of you, especially, you're on that top 10%, 25% class rank, give it a shot. It is so easy because literally it's recommendation letters, which you already have in Naviance, for the most of them. And then it's just a short answer questions and short essay questions. And they do not review standardized test scores. That's never been part of their review process. It is just entirely looking at how well you do academically, and which high school you're coming from, and the school profile, and they're always looking for more of a diverse class, mix as well. So really looking at it from all different aspects, with that admissions process. So I definitely hope to see more applications with our Schreier Honors College, from Trinity-Pawling. I haven't seen that in the past, so I'm really glad you asked me that question, because I really hope this number will increase from here onward. So
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
Chris, I'm going to pivot back to you. I'd like to get into early decision versus early action versus regular decision. So since you have, or Marist has all three options, could you kind of talk about the difference between all three?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, we actually like to make it more complicated. We added ED2 to the mix. So we have early decision 1, early action, early decision 2, and then regular decision. And if we can add an early decision 3, we'll probably do it later. The difference is that in early decision, whether it's 1 or 2, the student is unequivocally stating that Marist or the college they've applied to is their number 1 choice. And if they are accepted, they will enroll at that college or university. And at that point, and I should say you can only apply to 1 school ED. And if you are accepted, you then have to withdraw your other applications from the colleges and universities that you've applied to. The caveat there is that if the financial award package doesn't make it feasible for you to attend, then you can be released from your early decision agreement. The early decision agreement carries, in this process, what I would say is significant weight behind it. So Mr. Harff or Mr. Mead will be required to sign it. One of your parents or guardian will have to sign it, and you as the student will sign it. And so that is kind of the check and balance to ensure that you only apply to 1 ED institution. And then again, if you're accepted, you withdraw your other applications from the colleges that you've applied to. So the advantage for ED is none of the seats in the class have been given away, right? And so at Marist, we have a freshman class of approximately 1,200 students. We have 12,000 applicants. And so for the students who apply ED, the advantage is we haven't given away any of our seats to the freshmen yet. And so in that sense, there's an advantage there. We also know that these are the students who want to be at the college more than, say, an early action student or a regular decision student. Now, there are some who it is their first choice, but for a number of reasons, they don't apply ED. But for the ED students, those are students who absolutely know that they want to go to Marist. And so obviously we know that. So we typically enroll just over about 10% of our class through early decision. And then for early action, that is a non-binding deadline. And so you can apply to as many schools as you would like through an early action option, unless it's restricted early action, which I'll let maybe Mr. Mead or Mr. Harff talk more about, as I know some of those schools were releasing today. So early action is open essentially. And so you receive your admission decision, and then there's an exchange of power at this point, right? Because you apply and you're waiting. And then once you're accepted, now we're waiting, because we're waiting to see if you're choosing us or you're choosing Yvonne's school or Alan's school or wherever you would like to go. And so you have until May 1st in a normal year. Last year, many schools pushed it to June 1. Who knows what will happen this year, but in a normal year, you have until May 1st to submit your enrollment deposit to one school, and then obviously attend that school later after the summer. So that is what ED and EA are. Our RD regular decision is very similar to early action. It is a later deadline. And so obviously there, more of the seats have been given away. And so it can be more competitive because there are fewer seats that students are vying for. But it is also open, it's not binding, and you can wait until May 1st to decide which institution you will attend, and you can apply to multiple institutions through regular decision.
Since you opened up the topic of ED2, do you want to quickly describe what ED2 is?
Yeah, so ED2 is also binding. And so what will oftentimes happen is a student might apply to, say, a REACH school in the early decision 1 round. And they may have, let's say, Marist as their number 2 choice. And so they apply early decision to Harvard. Harvard turns around and says, sorry, you're deferred or you're denied. And then the student says, well, you know what? I really love Marist. And so I'm going to apply early decision to Marist. I'm just doing it at the second early decision deadline. All of the other rules still apply. It's binding, and you can only have one ED school that you've applied to at that time.
And for the parents at home and the juniors at home, early decision and early action usually is November, 1st of November, 15th of November. Then we sort of have this period where we're waiting to see what's happening. In fact, that's happening to your senior peers right now. They're hearing back from ED and EA applications. Then in January, that's when the ED2 will happen, because you've now heard from your ED1. And that's when the regular will also start to happen. As a general rule, that's the timeline.
And I'm gonna, Yvonne, can you just touch really quickly on after the early action round at Penn State, how rolling admission works?
Yeah, rolling means just as it rolls in, we will review the applications as it comes in. So then there's just no guaranteed in terms of like a timeline that we really give out to students. And that's when sometimes we withhold applicants, even though we sometimes might have reviewed it, but we're not sure. We're still looking at what the yield, what the enrollment would look like. And that's when we just don't have like a guaranteed time that we'll have a decision out to the students. Basically, that's what it means. And usually the turnaround time is 6 to 8 weeks. That's typically how long it's been taking, but it just, again, depends on the number of applications. Yeah.
Thank you. And then Chris did bring up restrictive early action. So there are some schools out there like Georgetown, Chris mentioned Harvard, that use restrictive early action. So what that means is the student can will apply early action to that school, but that they're asked not to apply early decision to any other schools. Alan, I'm going to move back over to you. I can't believe I waited until 8 o'clock to bring this one up, but can you talk about college essays and maybe some topics that you would avoid at all costs, and then some topics that you have seen that have been really, really good?
Essays. Wow. So the essays, obviously the essays are a place where we are getting to see your writing ability, your creativity, all those things kind of show themselves through, but they also kind of show a little bit about you, depending on your topic. Obviously, Common App gives you an option to choose an essay that, and of course, it all depends on the school too. You might have some prompts there as well. And then, of course, and really quick, I want to touch that there's also might be a supplement at some schools. We don't offer a supplement. I know when I worked at Dickinson for the first several years, there was a supplement. So I'll touch on a supplement really quickly. A supplement, at least for us at that time, is really specific to the school. So for example, Dickinson, has a mission of whatever, and how do you fit into that? And then you, of course, write that. I caution students about, like, for example, you see here, I'm Hobart and William Smith colleges. I'm not Hobart and William Smith University. I'm not, so, and of course, Dickinson is not Dickinson University or Dixon, or Marist is not Marist University. Penn State is not Penn State College. And no, I think Yvonne is an alum of Penn State. So make sure that when you're writing an essay and you choose to cite the school, you are talking about the right place. Because sometimes you might have an alum in that office that kind of might say, hey, what's up with that there?
Alan, we get UPenn a lot. I'd love to apply to UPenn, and then I'm like, denied. No, yes. So I get that a lot. I mean, so many times.
And it's like be very careful if you choose to cite that, as well as I remember getting an essay, and again, remember I said, we take a holistic view of the application. I remember a student writing about Alan Painter and how he made a fantastic impact on me. I remember meeting Alan at a college fair, and it was wonderful. So note that I'm going to do my due diligence now, because you talked me up now. I want the boss to know that, hey, I had everything to do with this one. And then I realized that that wasn't me at the college fair. It was my 5'2" blonde-haired colleague. So I know that wasn't me. So remember, if you are going to cite something very specific like that, make sure you're on point there, because we do, and that's the moral of the story, is we do read these essays. We do read them from start to finish. We are looking, again, we are admissions officers, not rejection officers. We're looking for every reason to admit you. So if there's something in your essay that I can really pull out, that is awesome. Perhaps my favorite essay, I don't remember word for word, quite frankly, was a young lady. I like some music. I like beats more than anything. So I love the sounds of things. So I can tell that this young lady was writing an essay that was pretty poetic, probably had a more hip hop feel to it, but very poetic. My colleagues didn't quite get it. And at one point she alluded to not turning out, something about pushing a stroller and having babies or something like that. It was along those lines. And no one quite got it, but because it connected with me so much and my upbringing and where I grew up right across the bridge from Philly, I knew exactly what she was talking about. I knew exactly the street she was talking about, Diamond, 12th and Diamond. I was like, wow, okay. It just hit. You never know who is reading your essay and what they're going to take from it. So I just love when students are creative. If you're writing an essay because you want to impress us, you will almost always fail. Just be you. Be you, have fun with it, and enjoy it, show your passion, show your writing ability. Just do it. And have what I call that mic drop moment. I want to I want to move my chair back from the computer and say, yeah, she dropped that mic and was like, yeah, great essay. If I can feel like that, it is a good essay. And if you feel like that, it's a good essay.
Thank you, Alan. Chris, Alan did bring up the supplement. So Marist does have a supplement. Can you just touch on that really quickly?
Yeah, so the supplement, as Alan said, is a more specific question about the college or university that you are applying to. And so essentially it's a shorter essay typically. Sometimes it can be questions, but it's typically a short response to a prompt that the college will ask. And so for us, oftentimes it is, why is Marist a school you're interested in attending? And so what that does is it just helps us better understand your level of thought in this process about us, and kind of helps us gauge, are we, as was said earlier, another application, or are we a school that this student has connected with, fully understands the academic experience, has a good understanding of the social experience, and they've done some due diligence on their part researching that. And so that's really what the supplement enables the colleges to better understand. But it also is an opportunity for you as a student to present yourself again, and advocate for yourself as to why you believe that school is the right fit for you.
And one thing I'd add on the high school side of things that students and parents should be aware of is obviously first and foremost is to finish that big essay that Alan was talking about, but not to lose sight of the supplemental essays, because more often than not, it's October 31st at 10 p.m. and we realize we've got 4 of them to do in half an hour. So just staying on top of that is another, back to what Mr. Mead was saying about students, you guys taking ownership of that process. That's something to definitely pay attention to.
And Mr. Harff, can I also point out that a
Yeah.
supplement and obviously, Chris, you read them, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but spelling counts just as much in a supplement and grammar counts just as much in a supplement as they do in the regular essay. And I've seen some kids sort of think, it's just a supplement, a throwaway. I can just do this real quick. No, you got to spend time. They're asking the question because they want to hear the answer. So you owe it to the school to put the time and effort into answering the question properly.
Yeah, and I would add it's even more important in the context of typically we have just finished reading your other essay.
Mhm.
And so you can have a stark contrast between the one that you've spent all your time preparing and having others help you proof versus the shorter response. It's kind of like the difference between seeing, something you've written in English class and something you've texted to a friend at times, right? There's just very different ways of communicating. And so, yeah, as Mr. Mead said, the time and care applied to your main essay should also be applied to your short responses.
Definitely. Yvonne, we did have one question come in during the registration specifically about the School of Engineering at Penn State. Could you just talk about the qualifications and what the engineering school looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So the only qualification really for academic requirements is to have that half a Carnegie unit of trigonometry, pre-calc, or calc. So I think for all those that are from Trinity-Pawling, that's really not an issue at all. You guys have definitely already got there. So that's pretty much the biggest ineligibility we've seen for people applying to students applying to the engineering college. So all of the College of Engineering coming in, students are all pre-major status, okay? So no matter if you're doing civil engineering, electrical engineering, environmental engineering, or I don't know, nuclear engineering, right? So it doesn't really matter what engineering field you want to actually go into. The first 2 years at Penn State, you're just coming into the College of Engineering as pre-major. What it means is you're doing your general education classes and you have your entrance to major requirement courses, okay? Now, architectural engineering and civil engineering is going to have a different GPA. So you may not be eligible to go into architecture if you didn't have that 3.2 that they're looking for, or that 3.0, or it's different for every single disciplinary area. So that's something just kind of to remember. Now, we get tons of applications for computer science engineering, okay? Now, that's within the College of Engineering, but then we also have an entire academic college called the Information Science and Technologies. That's a newer academic college, only that have 6 academic programs within that academic college, but they have data science, they have human-centered development, there's information science and technology, cybersecurity, like things that are really ties into computer science engineering, but then they're from a different academic college as well. So I always encourage students don't hone in on, okay, engineering, that's where I'm going, unless you know, like I want to go into biomedical engineering, unless I know I want to go into civil engineering. But if you're sort of going into the computer science engineering, look at other options. Now, one of those greatest things about Penn State is we have 275 academic programs, over 300 minors. So, and that's exactly why we design pre-major status across most of our academic colleges, except for nursing and arts and architecture, is the fact that students can explore their first 2 years. Now, you're not set in stone going into engineering. Now, I have to be an architectural engineer. I have to be, something in that. So it's just having that first 2 years is really a place where you can explore your passion, explore those opportunities. Now, I do have to mention College of Engineering is a very large academic college, about 8,000 undergraduate students, okay? But when you go into your actual department, let's say you transition into architectural engineering. Now, architectural engineering only has about a little over 300 undergraduate students. Now, that's where you really make a large university seem a lot more smaller, right? And that's also kind of like how the classes work. It's kind of works in the funnel, right? Initially, first 2 years, you're going to have these large classes. And then once you get into your major, that's when the classes, faculty to student ratio becomes much smaller as well. So hope that answers it a little bit more in context of how our academic colleges work.
Thank you. Alan, I'm going to turn over to you just because Hobart has, I believe, 2 engineering programs, one through Columbia and one through Dartmouth. So could you explain how those work?
Yeah, so we offer a 3+2 in engineering. So basically you would come in, typically a student would come in and major in physics here, but obviously there could be program like computer science, chemistry, bio, and all. It could be a multitude of majors that fit into that umbrella, but most time it's typically a physics program. With the program at Columbia, you'll spend your first 3 years here, and then of course, I think it's in the second year you apply to Columbia, and then of course the last 2 years there, and of course after the 5 years you have your bachelor's from Hobart and William Smith, as well as your bachelor's from Columbia. So it's going to be physics, and of course the engineering, whether it's chemical engineering or whatever it is, and as well as I believe applied science there. Very similar to a lot of 3+2 programs that other schools have. The program with Dartmouth works a little different, where you will still have your 2 bachelor's degrees at the end of 5 years. However, the first 2 years are spent here at HWS. The third year is at Dartmouth. You'll return then in your 4th year from HWS, and obviously you walk with your class, and then your last 2 years will be there. So that's just a little bit different from the other one. So students do have the option of whatever route they would like to take.
Thank you. Another question, I'm just going through the questions that we got. So these are coming from parents and students, but I'll throw this one to you, Chris. So students taking a gap year and then applying to school, after a year late, so to speak, is obviously something that's coming up with COVID. How are you guys looking at those applications, or those applicants, I should say, at Marist?
Yeah, so I have to say, surprisingly, I have not seen a lot of that so far in our early pool. So this year, our early action pool, we actually had the most early apps in the history of the college this year, and I was expecting to see more students who were taking gap years. And it really hasn't been a trend that I've noticed, or that my staff has noticed. For student, over the years, students have certainly done it. I think it's a great opportunity for a student, especially a student who's on the younger side, to go on and do something else. And I think a gap year can mean a number of different things, right? For some students, it might be a PG year. And for some students, it might be travel, exploration, research, experiential opportunities that they're doing locally, regionally, or abroad. So there are great ways to spend your time doing that. I think just be prepared to present the case in terms of being a productive, growth-oriented experience. If you were just hanging out in Europe, bouncing around between countries on the trains and not doing much else, then there's not much of a story there to share with the colleges. But if you have a purpose, and there are a lot of programs out there to choose from that are well structured and productive, then I think it can really be beneficial for many students. And for us, we oftentimes will see a student apply first, be accepted, submit their enrollment deposit, and then let us know that they would like to defer for a semester or for 2 semesters. And so I see that more often than I see students who opt to skip the application process, go on a gap year, and then apply while they're on the gap year. Because depending on the gap year experience you're having, it can be even more challenging to go through the application process while you're in the midst of this experience.
Absolutely. And for that question comes up a lot of times with students who are are at Trinity-Pawling, and sometimes it's a junior hockey year. And one thing I will say that Mr. Mead and I take a lot of pride in is that we're going to make sure that, as Chris said, it's tough to go through the whole college process, write an essay, get your recommendation sorted out when you're a whole year out of school. And that's one thing that we're going to make, that we make sure that all of our guys go, even if they're deciding to take a gap year, that they've gone through the college process to the point that they have an essay done, that they have the recommendations done, so that when they are, a year out, that they have an outline ready to go. Alan, I want to jump over to you, but before I do, we have one question that I'm going to answer in the Q&A right now from earlier, but we're probably going to sign off here in about 10 minutes. So if any parents or students have questions that they have not gotten or that they would like to ask, please put those in the Q&A. But Alan, I wanted to talk to you about students who take a fifth year or do a fifth high school. So at Trinity-Pawling, we have lots of, Chris mentioned PGs, but then with this audience, I think we're more geared towards the students who might come into a boarding school and repeat their sophomore year or repeat their junior year. So can you just talk about how that would look on your side of the table?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I love when I've seen students who have taken advantage of, whether it's personal growth or whether it's they switch schools. I know, when I first came here, there was certainly discussion about, students switching schools and, for whatever reason, it's always a case by case when dealing with that, why a student chooses to do that. I think it shows that that obviously the student was looking. I mean, sometimes it's sports too. So whatever reason it is, I just, quite frankly, I just want us to know that whatever the reason is, that they've taken advantage of all of the opportunity there. You've gotten to Trinity-Pawling. You didn't have, and I'll use my own son for example, Slade. Slade and I talked about this 2 years ago, actually. I said, Slade, I'm really thinking about my youngest son and possibly doing that fifth year. I just don't think he's ready socially. And of course, and he's still growing, and I'll say selfishly, he's 6 foot now, but he's still growing. The kid's 6'3", 300 pounds now. I really would have kind of liked to see him develop in every way. But it's case by case. But whatever it is, I just hope that they articulate their reasons and why they chose that, and that they've taken advantage of it positively, really.
And there is a very obvious section in the Common App that actually asks that exact question. So if you did take a fifth year of high school, you have to explain it. And oftentimes I think it's to Alan's point, it's a very valid reason, and it's something that can actually help your case. And so I have not seen in Trinity-Pawling, or my 4 years of Trinity-Pawling, it hurt someone at all. I think it's only,
you guys do an awesome job there. I mean, it's been great.
Mr. Mead, do you have anything else to add? There's one question I'm going to answer, but it's more towards you and me than the panelists. But if you had anything else you wanted to ask Yvonne, Chris, or Alan.
No, I'm good. I think that we've covered a lot of material tonight, and I mean, one of our mistakes is we assume everybody understands the process because it's so easy, but it isn't. And I really have enjoyed listening to the small school, middle school, large school perspective. It's a complicated process, but it's a doable process, and we will get you through it. But I don't have any more questions.
Okay. The only thing I'm gonna, and this kind of pivots to Mr. Mead, pivots back to Mr. Mead. We just threw a lot of information at you. Earlier this week, everyone should have gotten an email from Mr. Mead with a big, I don't even know how many pages, but 30-something page pamphlet that outlines, most importantly, our role, Mr. Mead and my role in the college process, so the school, the parents' role and the students' role. So that's something that I would really appreciate if everyone could read through. And if you come up with, if we started talking in college lingo and you have no idea what we're talking about, certainly reach out with questions. On that note, next week, I will be sending out an email with what we call our brag sheet. So one of the questions that came in right at the beginning was, how should the students start preparing for those meetings in January? Really, all they've got to do is next week when they get the brag sheet, fill that out. So the brag sheet will help us do two things. Mr. Mead talked about the Dunham Committee. So the Dunham Committee is Trinity-Pawling. We haven't, it hasn't been patented yet, but it probably should. We take about 16 of our best faculty writers, but they're also faculty who are very involved in the lives of the juniors on campus. So they're teaching them in the classroom. They might be in their dorms. They might be their coaches. They're their advisors. And every student is actually picked by one of these 16 writers. The writers are the Dunham Committee writes the body of the counselor letter or the secondary school report. That's the whole, so you've got your, like Mr. Mead talked about earlier, you've got your history or English teacher writing about what you're like in that classroom. You've got your science or math teacher writing, talking about what you are like in that classroom. And then the secondary school report is, who is Johnny outside of the classroom, on the sports field, in the dorm, or as a leader in the community? How was he in his GCC? What was a senior independent project? So it's this big letter that tells the colleges who we think you are. Back to the brag sheet, if there's pieces of your life outside of Trinity-Pawling, like community service trips you've done, maybe you play sports outside of our athletic program that you want included in that letter, that's an opportunity for you to tell us, and then I'll share it directly with the person who's writing your the first draft of your secondary school report. The other thing, it's kind of a two-part thing. The other piece of it is going to be actually going through and saying, do you want to be in the Northeast still? Do you want to look down south? Do you want to look out west in Arizona and California? Do you want to be in the Pacific Northwest? So looking at geography, and again, this is the penciled in list with an eraser on standby. So none of it is written in stone. We'll ask about size, and then major, and there's a few other questions in there that help us narrow down that initial list. But again, that'll be coming early next week to all of the students' emails. So your ticket into the meeting is to have that done. Anything I forgot in there, Mr. Mead?
No, that's pretty good, but it is funny. Alan, way back at the beginning of this evening, talked about Eagle Scout. And I will bet you we have 2 Eagle Scouts, maybe more, in our student junior class that we don't know about, because that's something you did back home. And we had a student a few years ago, he turned in his brag sheet and he was an Eagle Scout. And I think he went to Dickinson. So I think, and I'm laughing because that's where you were, Alan. But things like that are invaluable for us to know. We have a really good idea of what you've done at Trinity-Pawling. We have a very thick file on that. But if you want to brag, and that's why it's called a brag sheet, about stuff you've done at home, this is the place to put that information.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Thank you to Chris, Alan, and Yvonne, and Mr. Mead. Have a good night, and we will see you later on in this process.
Have a great holiday.
Thanks a lot. Happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Good night.